Welcome back. Batman media is no stranger to loss. The very myth of Batman was born from the loss of Bruce Wayne's parents, and we often see Batman face tremendous loss himself. Jason Todd, Alfred, Talia al Ghul, everybody dies around Batman. That's the curse of being the Bat. But it's within Batman Arkham City's Big Story DLC we see one of the best representations of loss and grief in the coveted Arkham franchise. So join me as we take a look at Harley Quinn's revenge, how it handles grief, and why it does it so well. Grief is defined as the emotional, physical, and mental response to loss, usually a death in the family, or a huge event where something close to you gets ripped away. It's something I'm sure we're all familiar with in one way or another, whether it's a family member, a pet, or something else. Harley Quinn's revenge focuses on the grief faced by the main characters caused by the death of the Joker at the end of Batman Arkham City, and obviously it really leans on this ending, and for good reason. It may not seem like it in hindsight, but killing the Joker off was a ballsy move from Rocksteady. At this point, Joker fatigue hadn't set in for most people, and coming off the back of Arkham Asylum, you'd think they'd keep their big moneymaker villain alive, even if it was by dropping him in a Lazarus pit, but no, they killed him. Joker never appears in a physical form after this game, canonically. He appears in the prequel and as a hallucination and as this thing, but never again physically. For all intents and purposes, this is where the Joker's story ends, and that's a very powerful tool. See, when the Joker dies, it isn't framed as a huge spectacle. It's framed as a sad and slow decay, a final splutter from the Clown Prince. It hits us as hard as it hits Batman, but for entirely different reasons. Batman is upset because if we believe what he says, he would have saved Joker and he blames himself for his death.
Do you want to know something funny? Even after everything you've done, I would have saved you.
And for us, we're surprised because, well, they killed the Joker of all people. We may have become pretty desensitised to the ending now over a decade later, but this is a huge statement to make to punctuate the end of what many consider the best superhero game ever. The grief from his death hits us, Harley and Batman all at the same time when we realise he's actually gone. Batman carries his arch-nemesis' lifeless corpse out of the Monarch Theatre, mimicking the tragedy of Cain and Abel from the Bible, where Cain ended up killing his brother Abel after God favoured an offering made by Abel and refused Cain's. It was a murder committed out of jealousy and irrational thinking, which ironically is almost the exact opposite of how Joker dies. Joker's death is kind of shrouded in sympathy and regret. Batman wishes he could have saved him. He tells Joker that as soon as he realises he can't save him. And it frames the moment not as one of triumph, but for one of sympathy for Mr. J. The camera pan out, the dialogue. This is a moment of reflection. A reflection of Joker's life and the relationship Batman and Joker once shared, now brought to an end. By the time we reach Harley Quinn's revenge, the landscape of Arkham City has changed in a way that is impossible to ignore. Joker is dead, Harley has gone completely off the deep end, and Batman, well, he's somewhere inside the steel mill. He's gone completely off the grid. No contact, no updates, nothing. It's in one of the very first conversations between Tim Drake and Barbara where the emotional landscape of this DLC becomes very clear, and it sets the tone going forward. We learn that Bruce hasn't spoken about Joker or Talia since the night in the Monarch Theatre. He's gone cold, colder than he normally is, and this is where an overlooked detail shows up. See, Barbara and Tim are actually grieving too, but not in the same way. They're dealing with what's known as anticipatory grief. It's a form of grief that comes before the actual loss, the fear of losing someone mentally or emotionally before they're actually gone physically. See, Bruce is still alive, but the version they know and love is slipping.
Barb, I found the missing cops. Quinn's got them.
Any sign of Bruce?
Negative. I'm gonna keep looking. Harley's telling the cops she's got some sort of plan for them. They'll be safe for now.
Be careful.
This'll end okay. I promise.
You think? He's not been the same since... He won't even talk about Talia or Joker.
We'll help him once we find him. It's all we can do.
As we play as Tim, it becomes obvious that we're not only racing to save Batman from suffocating inside the giant steel ball, we're racing to save the part of Bruce that existed before Joker died. Somewhere in there is the man he used to be, buried under all that guilt and exhaustion. The mission becomes almost symbolic. We're trying to save the Batman who will heal, the one who will push through this and get up after he's fallen after this night is over. And Tim, in a way, succeeds, but not instantly. See, Bruce walks out of Arkham City with his head barely above water, and by the time we reach Arkham Knight, he seems stable-ish again. Affected, but nowhere near as bad as we see him here. However, it's in the final cutscene I think everything fractures and he really snaps. Not in an outburst of anger, but in a defeated way. Bruce faces the possibility of Tim's death in the explosion, and when he sees he's alive and confirms the cops are safe, he says he's done here and just grapples away. There's no debrief with Gordon, no word to Tim, not even a check-in with Oracle. He just leaves.
I'm done here.
It's incredibly powerful and shows us that this isn't a one and done bout of guilt or fear. This is a part of him now, and it didn't die with the steel mill. Bruce doesn't want to be there anymore. Arkham City has taken a piece from him he'll probably never get back. And Harley Quinn's revenge shows us that this version of Batman is holding himself together by his iron willpower alone. This guilt, loss, and grief is brought together by Kevin Conroy's performance as a cold and grieving Batman. His performance presents itself as one of the strongest parts of Harley Quinn's revenge. The moment you first hear Batman, you can hear it. Every line he delivers comes out harsher and heavier than the main game. He is angry, but like I said earlier, that anger never explodes.
Give me the code.
Yeah, no problem. See? I'm doing what you wanted.
There was never any doubt in my mind.
It sits with him and it sits with us, and you can almost see the weight within him slowing him down. He sounds like he's lost something important to him, which, in a weird, really messed up way, he kind of has. The Joker was never a friend, far from it. Hell, he crippled Barbara, tortured and killed Jason Todd, or at least Batman thinks he killed him, and he wasn't far from killing Batman countless times. He's killed thousands, but he was a defining presence in Bruce's life. Losing him means losing a piece of the world Batman has spent years navigating, and losing him means something worse could arise. Joker sat as the lid on the bottle of crime. It never got bigger than Joker, not that we saw anyway. He was always the one doing the big stunts, and in a way, this was predictable. It sounds weird to call the Joker of all people predictable, or to insinuate Batman was somehow grieving Joker's death while worrying about what was next, but I don't think it's too far of a stretch. There's a comfort in the knowledge that the unpredictability was somewhat predictable, like Batman says himself at the end of the game.
Every decision you've ever made ends with death and misery. People die. I stop you. You'll just break out and do it again.
Batman always knew something was going to happen with the Joker, and when it did, he'd stop him. But after he dies, there's nothing. As we hear Gordon say at the start of Arkham Knight, Gotham is quiet and crime rates are at an all-time low following the Joker's death. And until Scarecrow sets arguably the biggest plot to destroy Gotham yet in motion, it's quiet. Conroy's direction to take Batman down a quieter, more reserved path was a subtle performance choice, but it hits incredibly hard. There's something wrong with Batman in this DLC, something that none of the characters have the heart to say out loud, but everyone knows. The emotional core of this version of Batman is often overlooked because he's usually written as a more reserved and sometimes emotionally flat interpretation, with only a few standout moments where the mask cracks, but Harley Quinn's revenge changes that. Batman lost Talia, who he genuinely cared about. He failed to save Hugo Strange, even though Strange engineered this nightmare that nearly destroyed him, and most of all, he failed to save the Joker, his biggest enemy. Now, it's easy to argue that none of these people deserve to live based on the crimes they committed, but that's not how Batman's mind works, and that's not what I'm here to talk about. In his view, if someone dies on his watch, that death belongs to him. That's a level of emotional turmoil that most people would struggle to process, let alone someone who has built his entire myth around being a symbol of hope for the people who need it. There's a really small moment in the flashback sequence where you can speak to Commissioner Gordon before entering the steel mill.
I know you blame yourself. Don't. It wasn't your fault.
Gordon tells Batman that he shouldn't blame himself for what happened. He tries to reassure him that none of this was his fault. But Bruce is the only one who carries the weight of these losses because he was there for all three of them. Talia, Strange, and Joker all died in front of him. And despite everything they'd done, Bruce thinks he could have saved them if things had gone differently. And although Jim's words probably fall on deaf ears, we know he's right. Bruce shouldn't blame himself because when we look at the deaths, they weren't preventable unless Bruce had known what was going to happen prior to them happening. Talia was shot in the back, and although Bruce pieced it all together before she was shot, he couldn't have physically moved her out of the way. Strange was literally backstabbed, and Joker basically killed himself. In his desperation, he stabbed Batman in the arm, forcing him to drop the cure, and Bruce couldn't have stopped any of that. Conroy's performance stands out so well here as one of his best in the franchise. He plays Batman as a man who's been wounded in a way that he can't talk about, and that's incredibly powerful. Not only does Conroy deliver one of my favourite Batman performances ever in such a short time, he delivers it in a way which bridges the gap between the relatively stoic and unmoving mental juggernaut of Arkham City and the more open, visibly emotional man we play as in Arkham Knight. Obviously though, the large portion of grief in this DLC is shown through Harley Quinn. She's the titular big bad in this story and is the driving force behind its events, and I think it's justified to say this is Harley's shining performance in the series. Harley's grief manifests outwardly, and that's the key difference between her and Batman throughout this story. In the main game, she is fiercely loyal to the Joker. She's with him during the chaos of the events of Arkham City, and she stays with him by his side even when he's dying, and she even ends the night standing outside the Monarch Theatre, waiting for her immortal Mr. J to rise from the ashes of the fake Joker gag, and when that moment never comes, she breaks. Her entire world crumbles in front of her because to her, Joker was the endgame. Her character design in the DLC is the first window into that collapse. Her hair is black now, with a single red tip on the same side that was red during Arkham City. I believe that this is an intentional callback to who she used to be, only drained of colour everywhere else. Her outfit, though, is mostly unchanged, which makes the differences even more prominent. Her makeup is smeared, and not in the theatrical Joker way, but in the streaked pattern of someone who's been crying for days. Her veil covers her face like she's attending a funeral, and in a way, she kind of is. She's mourning the Joker, but she's also mourning the life she projected onto him, the future she believed they would share. The identity she built around being the partner of Gotham's greatest monster died with Joker, and this is where we hit our big point of conversation, which is much more simple than people would have you believe. If we rewind back to the main game, there's a detail that confused the entire Arkham community for years. In Joker's office next to Harley's old outfit, we find a pregnancy test showing a clear positive. At the time, it felt like a setup and a sign of things to come in future games, but when we return to the steel mill only 2 weeks later in Harley Quinn's Revenge, things aren't the same as before. Right in the middle of the room stands a crib, and inside is the Scarface doll, painted to look like a Joker baby's stand-in, surrounded by negative pregnancy tests. And these tests make one thing painfully clear: Harley Quinn was never pregnant to begin with. Clown Puncher has a great breakdown on this topic, which I will link below if you want the deep dive, but I'll try and summarise it here, and the simple truth is written on the test box itself. It reads, "Test may result in false positive." That is the entire twist. Harley took her first test, it gave her a false positive, and she built her hope around it. She waited for a baby that was never coming, and when Joker died, she reached for that hope again, knowing it was the only thing connecting her back to Mr. J. She took more and more tests, desperate to confirm that some part of him was still alive inside her, and tragically for her, every single one came back negative.
Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna kill for you the whole damn world.
And from there, the spiral begins. She's trying to fill the void Joker left behind, trying to cling to the idea that she could continue her life with that last remnant of him, only to learn that the baby she imagined never even existed. That's why she uses the Scarface doll as a stand-in for the baby she never had and never actually lost. She can't face the reality that she lost Joker and that she never had this child in the first place, so uses Scarface as a sort of symbolic substitute. And the detail that really drives this home is the pregnancy test box in the crib, because it's a different box from the one in the main game. They literally made an entirely new box for this. This was an intentional change, and Rocksteady wanted this detail to stand out. It could not be more direct. Harley was never pregnant. Batman did not cause a miscarriage either. In fact, based on the sheer number of tests she takes after that initial false positive, I believe, alongside her grieving for the child, and that is the operative phrase in that sentence, I believe, this is just part of a theory, Harley thinks Batman did in fact cause her miscarriage. She believes he took the Joker from her and then the baby she thought she was carrying. That belief, baby theory or not, fuels everything she does in the DLC. Her rage, her grief, her desperation, it all leads to her rigging the steel mill, the last place she and the Joker called home, with enough explosives to kill herself, Batman, Robin, and every one of her remaining crew. She is ready to die if it means taking Batman with her, safe in the knowledge that when she goes, she'll be with Mr. J forevermore. These two tragic events compounding onto one another are enough to send anyone over the edge. I'm sure I don't have to spell out to you how much pain and anguish that would leave anyone in, but Harley, unlike Batman, doesn't internalise her pain. She quite literally wears it. Her outfit, her living quarters, they both scream of pain and loss. If she wasn't genuinely insane, you'd have no choice but to feel some level of sympathy for her. The story handles her in a very careful but also brash way, turning her into the sole aggressor, which is something we don't see often in Batman media. She's got all this built-up pain and anger and hope ripped away from her at a time when it was looking up for her and Mr. J, and she's turning it into revenge. Hell, it's in the title. This isn't a Batman story, it's not even a Robin story. This entire DLC is a Harley Quinn story. It shows her loss, her pain, and it shows it by giving Harley's character, both physically and mentally, a makeover. She's no longer the ditzy sidekick Joker ordered around. She's commanding an army of thugs, kidnapping and securing Batman, which, unless you count the entire events of Arkham Asylum as trapping Batman, Joker never did. She turns this rage into something, for better or for worse, productive. The steel mill itself is also a prime example of this grief, both internally and externally. The steel mill in Harley Quinn's Revenge feels like a physical manifestation of Harley's mind, with the entire building becoming a kind of haunted monument to what she's lost, and that transformation is hard to ignore because this location once thrived on the heat and the chaos, yet now every corner feels like it's suffocating under the weight of something that's burned out for good. The spark that defined Joker's presence pulsed through the steel mill like a heartbeat, and forgive the on-the-nose nature of this, but it feels like the spark literally died with Joker. This DLC replaces that manic energy with nothing. It replaces it with cold air and silent walls, which creates the sense that you're not just exploring an old environment, but instead stepping into a space that has forgotten how to breathe. It looks like a building frozen mid-collapse, holding on to the scraps of an identity it can't fully sustain anymore. And the longer you stand in it, the more you sense that Harley has reshaped the mill into a reflection of a world she refuses to accept has changed forever, and that is her world. The decay almost feels thematic, because in the main game of Arkham City, the mill had this strange feel where even the grime felt animated, like the whole place was running on a mix of molten steel and the Joker's undeniable charisma. But now the atmosphere's collapsed into something colder, as if the colour was drained from the building itself. The colour palette shifts from intense, heat-soaked oranges to really dreary blues, and they strip away any lingering warmth, turning the mill into the kind of environment that looks more like a makeshift wake than a base of operations. This is most prevalent in the room where you rescue the first police officer as Batman. If we compare it to its initial appearance in the main game, one is bright and not inviting, but certainly more lively, and then here it's just dead. Nothing has been cleaned up, repaired, or rearranged, and the same goes for Joker's office, which is arguably in a worse state given the grief surrounding it. Harley has kept every mark, every piece of debris, every broken bit of steel, exactly where it fell on the night she lost the only person she truly cared about. It's a choice that says more about her than any line of dialogue ever could, because it shows how deeply she clings to the moment her life stopped moving forward, and the building almost becomes a testament to the idea that grief can freeze a person in place a long time after it should have carried them somewhere else. The deeper you travel, the more the DLC pushes you into areas you never touched in the main story, and the constant sense of disorientation becomes a deliberate narrative tool rather than a simple expansion of the map. The whole place acts as a shrine to Joker, covered in threats to Batman and monuments to Mr. J, and that's not even mentioning the actual Joker shrine she traps Batman in. The unfamiliarity adds this creeping tension that goes beyond the surface level danger of thugs, because Batman, Robin and Harley are all dealing with a world that has fundamentally altered itself in the absence of Joker, and the player is pulled into that shift whether they want to be or not. You start to realise that the mill isn't a place you know how to navigate anymore. It becomes a labyrinth crafted from emotional instability, and when the game finally loops you back into spaces you do remember, the effect is even stronger, because the recognisable rooms and the comfort that comes from that familiar feeling offers comfort for a split second before the atmosphere reveals how different everything actually is. These rooms carry the skeleton of what they once were, but none of the life, and that absence of life mirrors Harley's fractured identity, and it also mirrors Batman's situation, because he has always had a predictable rhythm to his encounters with Harley, a rhythm tied directly to the presence of Joker. I mean, look at their previous Arkham encounters. They all end with Harley being thrown aside, and without that constant, the dynamic between them feels stretched thin and strangely empty. The familiarity works against you, reminding you of the chaos that used to fill the corridors, the roaring heat, the violent colour, the thugs, the lights, the sense that anything could explode at any moment. Yet now everything feels still and somewhat cold, in a way the first time we saw the steel mill never could feel. By blending the deeply familiar with the fully unexplored, the steel mill stops functioning as a setting and becomes a narrative tool in its own right, guiding the player through an emotionally charged space that reflects Harley's refusal to move on and Batman's struggle to navigate the aftermath of a war he technically survived but hasn't recovered from. It all feels like it's stuck in place. The result is an environment that communicates more about these characters than any cutscene could, and it becomes clear that the mill has become a shrine and a prison at the same time, holding Harley hostage in the moment of her life where it all fell apart, and challenging Batman to confront spaces that once felt alive, but now serve as reminders of a rivalry since brought to an end. Harley Quinn's Revenge is easily one of the best pieces of DLC content the Arkham series ever got. It handles its ideas with the right amount of weight and delivers one of the best stories ever told in the series. I had this video idea while listening to an album called Post Traumatic by Mike Shinoda, who might be familiar to some of you because he's the co-vocalist of Linkin Park, and the album came out following the death of Chester Bennington. It's a really raw and vulnerable look into his mind following the death of his best friend, and although I've listened to the album a few times, it was only during my most recent listen it really hit me that grief is something a lot of media doesn't handle well. But Harley Quinn's Revenge gives it a pretty good go, and hopefully this video has changed the way you look at this entire story. I do hope you all enjoyed. Leave a comment, like, hype the video because that does help a ton, and subscribe. We're pushing for 20k by the end of the year. The odds of it happening are pretty slim, but hey, God loves a trier. It'd be pretty cool. I do hope you enjoyed this video though, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.